Ahoy and welcome. This is Admiral. AoE 2 pikemen get the short end of the stick when measuring their reach against their historical counterparts. Obviously, AoE 2 is far from perfectly historical, but how well would pikemen perform if given one range like the Kamayuk? Let's find out. Now, spearline units have a clear use case as a cost-effective, goldless counter to most mounted units, and I don't think a general buff for them is needed. So to be clear, this is not a proposal for such a thing. But rather, you might consider this as a possible civilization bonus, or just a hypothetical examination of the power of range applied to that unit, as is the case in some mods, and what changes might be needed in order to make it balanced. As for why pikemen and not halberdiers, part of the reason may be obvious in terms of aesthetics and the historical logic I've alluded to, as despite being pigeonholed into a single AoE 2 unit line, pikes were very distinct from spears and halberds for their exceptional length. So the civilization that got this ability as a bonus or technology would miss the halberdier upgrade and could even have a unique unit upgrade to the spear or pike line for a semi-unique pikeman, perhaps with a visibly longer weapon. The other reason is that such a strong ability is easier to balance this way, as a fully upgraded halberdier that also had one range would just be too strong in too many circumstances, as I'll demonstrate in this fight against equal resources worth of generic champions. As you see, the champions still win fairly comfortably, but that's just because I did a lazy test where I didn't micro my ranged units. With some micro, I'm able to take advantage of the halberdier's range, greater speed, and compensate for their lower attack rate, thus earning a convincing victory against units that would ordinarily dominate halberdiers. The disclaimer is that it does take them a while to whittle the champions down, and it won't always be worth your time to micro a trash unit. Still, this is quite the reversal, so I think you'll agree that if we want a balanced unit, giving this ability to halberdiers is
not a great plan.
Before we look at a few more fights, let's make the obvious comparison with the existing ranged pikeman, the Kamayuk. First off, the Kamayuk is much tankier with 70 or 80 hit points for its regular and elite forms, versus 55 for pikemen. A fully upgraded elite Kamayuk also has 5 melee and 6 pierce armor, versus 3 and 4 for a pikeman. Spearman line units also take 3 extra damage from archer line units, and 3 or 4 from regular or elite skirmishers, whereas the Kamayuk only takes standard infantry damage. So while the Kamayuk takes 20 shots from an arbalester and 60 from an elite skirmisher, a pikeman instead takes 7 and 8 shots from those units. And finally, Kamayuks attack significantly faster and have a higher base attack, making them better generalists and with anti-cavalry damage per second close to that of a pikeman, despite having a nominally lower bonus value. These are just some considerations that may mitigate the power of adding such a strong bonus to spearline units, but of course the pikemen have the significant advantages of training from the barracks, being cheaper overall, and not costing gold. But let's see how giving one ranged pikeman would affect some important unit interactions. We'll look at their performance against generic enemy halberdiers, hussars, skirmishers, and finally champions again. Against halberdiers they do quite well, easily beating out generic, but generally losing to Slav, Burmese, and Dravidian halberdiers. Although of course even in those matchups you could micro-nerd your way to victory. Although the practicality of this is sometimes questionable, and in reality you'll normally be taking fire from skirmishers or other ranged units as part of a mixed army. Still, their performance here is impressive. Versus hussars, a large group of ranged pikemen performs about as well as above average halberdier. Although this is such a hard counter matchup that there isn't much of a difference in outcomes between ranged pikemen and halberdiers with a strong bonus. And this does require a reasonable mass of pikemen before they become comparable to halberdiers against cavalry. One interesting interaction is against elite skirmishers, where they fare far worse than generic halberdiers. Equal resources worth of generic halberdiers clear the field pretty easily, but ranged pikemen actually don't usually get into the skirmishers' minimum range zone enough to make them move, so the skirmishers attack more efficiently without running away. You could micro them for somewhat better results, but the skirm player can also micro or maintain a front line of melee units. And lacking that, neither of these fights are as realistic as they could be. And finally, we have a rematch of the champion battle, and it's a decisive victory for the champions, with the ranged pikemen performing better than generic halberdiers, but generally worse than outstanding Dravidian or Slav halberdiers. Once again, you could technically micro your way to victory, but having tried this, it is extremely impractical given how much time and space it takes, so the opportunity cost of doing that is quite high. So to summarize our results, ranged pikemen, fully upgraded except the halberdier tech, are seen in these battles to perform about as well as the excellent Halberdiers of other civilizations against other melee units with low armor, with the potential to perform even better with micromanagement, although with the trade-offs of requiring a mass to be this effective and being worse against skirmishers. All in all, this is quite a strong bonus even without the Halberdier upgrade, although there are further options to clip their wings if needed by withholding squires or one of the blacksmith technologies, although going much further than that would likely be overcompensating. Whether or not you think this is a good idea, let's be honest, this looks awesome. And I enjoy the idea of these unique pikemen being more powerful when in close formation, with the obvious trade-off of greater vulnerability to siege. Obviously, this has not been an exhaustive series of tests, and there are other possible implementations such as partial range, but we'll save that discussion for another time. Do you like this idea as a possible civ bonus or unique tech? Or is it too powerful or too derivative of the Kamayuk? You can let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching. This has been me presenting the prodigiously powerful poking prowess of potentially playable pull-maxed pikemen. Till next time.